Hello and welcome to Season 8, Episode 1 of the Ubuntu podcast. It's Tuesday the 10th of March, and in this episode we're going to be discussing what's been happening in the news and in the Ubuntu community. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Alan.
Hello.
And Laura.
Hello.
Lovely. How are you two this fine week?
Good.
Good.
Good to be back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Got my tea and cake.
Skip the whole, well, we're back. It's a new season and everything.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just,
of course it is.
Back into it.
Yeah, well, I thought we'd sort of cover that organically through the show, but since you brought it up, yeah, we're back. We decided that we are once again glutton for punishment, and we thought we'd give this podcasting thing another go because, 8th time lucky.
We'll keep trying.
Yeah. So, we'll reveal all kinds of stuff as we go through, and everyone will pick up on all the details, as and when. Yeah,
minor changes to a few things, and even minor changes to others. Yes. Of course, we're not in the same studio anymore, so let's see how that goes.
No. From our point of view, that's probably the biggest change.
Yes.
I don't know whether that's as obvious to the real people in the outside world.
Real people? You mean the listeners?
Yeah, we don't really exist.
I guess people will notice, and maybe we had some complaints about the audio quality. Maybe this will make a big difference, or maybe it won't make any difference at all. Yeah.
Well,
should we get on with it?
Sounds like a fun-packed show.
Hey, there it is.
And now it's time for some news. Alan.
Yes. Valve and HTC have announced a VR headset called the Vive VR headset. And it was announced at GDC, and it'll be running Valve's upcoming VR technology, whatever that means.
It looks rather
VR
cool. I just watched it. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's got two screens at 1200 by 1800, which is quite high resolution, really close up to your face. Yeah. Running at 90 frames a second, which seems quite a lot.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're attached to some sensors that track your movement, and apparently the possibility to connect a pair of base stations to track you around a room, although I'm not sure how many people have a room that
it says up to 15 by 15 feet,
right.
Which
so a special
not
room.
Your living room.
The holodeck.
Yeah, quite that kind of experience. I don't know. Maybe they'll have special gaming arcades will come back into vogue with the sort of VR thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
a sort of VR thing.
It said that said in the article I read that Fireproof Games, who make The Room, have signed up to do some game for it. Which, I mean, I don't play lots of games, but I do like The Room. And
would you play it if it was an immersive 3D experience?
I'd be up for giving it a go. Yeah.
What is The Room?
It's a really terrible film and quite a fun game. Completely
is it
unrelated.
A film?
Oh, it's the worst film ever, but that's another story.
It's completely unrelated. Yes. It's a tablet game, but it's one of these that's got amazing graphics, and it's made in Guildford, just down the road from you.
That. Yeah, it's like anyway, we're not really talking much about VR headsets, but it's quite a good game. I recommend you check it out.
Yes.
I think it's one of those things with VR headsets. You have an idea of what would be good on a VR headset, but all the videos I've seen is people watching a video of a roller coaster or something, and then someone else pulling on the back of their chair and watching them freak out and fall over. I've not actually seen something that I would actually want to experience.
Well, I'm wondering, because this is an HTC thing, I'm wondering if that means that they're going to look at, you're going to be able to pair your phone with a VR headset and have some sort of 3D gaming thing powered by the phone in your pocket, rather than having to have it hooked up to a PC or whatever.
Well, that would be interesting, but given it's got quite... Well, I don't know. Has it got the power inside the headset?
Well, that's a good question.
Those
because it sounds like you're going to need a really high spec graphics card to actually run these. So I don't know whether they're really aimed. Maybe they're not meant to be aimed at your casual gamer. Like the Oculus Rift seems more like you could just plug it into your existing hardware and give it a go, as long as it can support 3D stuff. But this seems like it might need something a bit meatier and more specialised.
I did have a go on an Oculus Rift before Christmas, and I got to walk around the Millennium Falcon, which was quite cool.
Did it make you feel sick?
No. Other people and some of the other people who were trying it were actually found not that one, but some of the other games with it, really quite scary, which I didn't.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was bizarre. I did go walking around underwater for quite a long time, and I was scared when I got eaten by a shark.
Well, you would be, wouldn't you?
So, yeah.
Mark, save us from this.
The Federal Communications Commission in the US have reclassified broadband as a telecommunications service under Title II of the Communications Act of 1934. And what this means is that it gives them the jurisdiction to regulate providers of broadband, which in turn means that they can then hopefully successfully impose net neutrality laws.
It's basically like your utility supplies, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. So they're now saying that they're classified just like telephone companies are, which means that they can't do things like blocking legal content or degrading quality of service for particular sites or offering paid prioritization. They have to treat everything going across the network as the same, which is the whole idea of net neutrality.
Has there been uproar about this, or has it been roundly accepted as a good thing?
I think there was quite a lot of debate in the run-up to it, because obviously there's some fairly powerful monopolistic companies who offer broadband in the US, and they like to be able to do as they please. But there's also a lot of customers of these companies who don't like the idea of their Netflix getting slowed down because they haven't bowed to extortion.
And part of the problem in America is that there's limited choice.
Yes, exactly.
So, like here where I live, I've got 3 or 4 broadband providers who come knocking at my door to, for me to choose them over
and you've got
my current provider.
2 different physical media to choose from as well.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Well, potentially more than that. But, there's copper cables, there's the cable from my cable TV provider, and then there's also potentially fibre.
Yes.
So there's potentially 3 options there. But in America, there's regions where there is only one provider. You have no option.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like the vote was down party lines.
Yes. So it was a 3-2 split. So it was a close call.
Time for some legal news, Laura.
Yep. So the SFC. Software Freedom Conservancy bringing GPL compliance lawsuit against VMware.
Ooh. What have they done then?
I don't know. I didn't finish reading the thrilling article about this.
So GPL violations usually come about when a company distributes the binary build embedded in something somewhere, and then they refuse to distribute the source code or the necessary build instructions in order to replicate that. Is that what's happened in this case?
It seemed VMware produced a product called ESXi, which is their sort of virtualization platform, like the bare bones thing which you stick on a server, which you want to then run a load of VMs on. And that has bits of Linux kernel and a system called BusyBox, which is like an embedded shell environment with a load of Unix tools built into it, and that's
often used on routers and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Any embedded device which you can sort of SSH or make a serial connection to is usually running BusyBox because it's really lightweight. But yeah, so this is part of their ESXi platform, which is proprietary, and they are not distributing the source code. And there's a kernel developer called Christoph Hellwig, who has been working with the Software Freedom Conservancy to look into this, and has found that basically they're using code which they're not releasing the source code to, as they're required to do so by the license. And the SFC have spoken to VMware and said, you should really be releasing the source code, and they've said, we're not going to.
And that just seems like a really bad move.
Yeah.
Because everybody gets the GPL now.
Absolutely.
Isn't that the standard response from everyone who gets approached with, you should release the source? Every random router manufacturer or cell phone manufacturer who are using the Linux kernel and don't distribute the source code, their usual response is, stonewall, don't reply, or no, we're not going to bother.
But I would have thought that VMware would...
legal recourse is the only option.
I would have thought that VMware would... I know, they seem to be sort of a big enough company who are exposed to this kind of environment enough that they would know that if you just say no, go away, then that's going to mean bad things happen.
It's not like they can claim ignorance of... I don't know. It seems a bit odd.
And then, where is this being heard? Is this in Texas or
no? It's Hamburg in Germany, which I guess is where Christoph Helbig is.
Interesting.
He has a German-sounding name. I'm basing it on that.
Good work. So, is this going to run for ages and ages and ages, like the
Linux, whatever it is,
legal thing happened years ago that we've all forgotten about?
Yeah, I expect so. Either that or VMware are going to, people are going to do what they did to Groupon. VMware are going to go, oh, we're really sorry.
Yeah, can't see that happening. Anyway, moving on, talking about Linux kernel and source code. The Linux kernel now has a code of conflict, which was published recently and has been approved by a number of contributors to the Linux kernel. They've signed off on this code of conflict, which I guess is a play on the code of conduct that's popular in many open source projects. It's designed to set the rational basis for our code reviews and gives some advice on how to conduct them, and provides an escalation channel for any kernel developer if they so desire it.
Wow. And it's been signed off by Linus Torvalds as well, included as one of those developers.
So does it basically mean he still gets the right to be a bit of a douche to people,
it does
they have an escalation process?
It does advise you not to be a bit of a douche to people, but then basically the escalation process is the Linux Foundation have a technical advisory board, and you can basically go to them and say, the person reviewing my code is making me feel, threatened, unwelcome, or whatever else, and they will do something. Advise you technically, I suppose.
It does make me wonder if they'd had this in place like 3 years ago, when some other people have complained about the toxic atmosphere in the Linux kernel development community, whether that would have made any difference. What would have happened 3 years ago if this was in place? Would people have used it and gone to the Linux Foundation and escalated it, or would it just have been ignored? I'm interested to know how this will change things going forward, and how it would have impacted, all those people who've already walked away or have already decided no longer to contribute. Could it have undone that?
I sort of wonder whether it's become more acceptable to make those kind of complaints now, because I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, if Linus really annoyed you or really upset you, you might just leave because you feel that you couldn't escalate it. Whereas now it's so public, there's been such public criticism of some of the things that he and other people have said or done.
So it had to be that bad for a while for it to get escalated to this point.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not involved in that the community there at all, so I don't know what it's like. But yeah, sort of, it feels like it's a bit more public and acceptable to follow those kind of processes now, maybe.
Or maybe more expected rather than acceptable.
Yeah.
I do wonder if there'll be less people blogging and tweeting that they're unhappy with Linus, and actually more following the process, and it will just be dealt with behind closed doors. So perhaps we just won't get to hear about this anymore. We just won't see the conflict anymore, because either it gets resolved behind closed doors, or it doesn't get resolved and people just leave.
Yeah. But then they'll probably blog about it if they then leave as a result of it.
But then it's too late, and we're in no better position than we were 3 years ago. Who knows?
No.
Time will tell.
Yes.
But then it gives people who are being complained about won't necessarily feel so defensive about it, because it's less public and humiliating on their part, possibly. Then it's a bit more... I don't know.
I wonder if people will also use the code of conflict as a stick to beat people with, as people do in the Ubuntu community and in other communities. They say, oh, well, that's against the code of conduct, incorrectly. They'll wield it against people just for, using a swear word or being a little bit patronising, perhaps. People will use the code. Oh,
in
that's
the
against
open
the
source
code of
community, surely not.
conduct. Well, yes, Mark, it really happens. Go on, Mark. Tell us about Wikimedia.
Finally, Wikimedia, the Wikimedia Foundation, is suing the US National Security Agency and Department of Justice over the overarching surveillance programs revealed by Edward Snowden. And they've stated the intention of the case is to end the mass surveillance program in order to protect the rights of their users around the world.
Yeah, and there's a whole group of people involved.
Yeah, this
in
isn't just
like
Wikimedia.
group of organisations.
Yeah, loads of organisations who are not just.
Who else?
I mean, there's
National Association of Criminal Defence Lawyers. It's an American thing, I think. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International USA.
Oh wow.
Pen America Centre. I know the name. I can't remember what it's for. Global Fund for Women, The Nation magazine, the Rutherford Institute, and the Washington Office on Latin America.
That's quite a chunky number of people for the NSA.
Yeah, and it's quite a broad sort of spectrum. It's not like, because I saw more sort of human rights, free speech kind of things, and then it sort of diverges a bit, and there's quite a diverse range of organisations and things they represent.
Yeah, and they're being represented by the American Civil Liberties Union.
Well.
So, yeah.
So the year starts off with multiple lawsuits. Not much positive news in the news this week. Let's hope there's more positive
Except that
stuff.
we're back.
Well, that's the most positive news there could possibly be. Is that the end of the news?
I believe it is.
The Ubuntu podcast needs you. Yes, you. If there's something you think we should talk about, or someone we should talk to, tweet at UUPC or email podcast@ubuntu-uk.org. You can also talk to us on the telephone, Skype, Facebook and Google+. Find links to all these places on our website, podcast.ubuntu-uk.org. And remember, if we don't hear from you, we might not have enough content, and that can only mean one thing: more quizzes.
Might need a new jingle.
We might.
Let's talk about that a little bit
Tony
later.
still gets to be in every episode.
There is that, yes. So we've got some community news, and there's a couple of items here. Laura, do you want to pick the first one?
So Ubuntu Mate.
That's Mate or Mate.
Mate is now an official flavour. So what does that mean to be an official flavour? Alan?
It's a good question. So basically, official flavors are built, the ISO images are built on the canonical infrastructure and hosted on the canonical infrastructure. So unlike what you might call a derivative distribution like Linux Mint or Bodhi Linux or one of the other million Ubuntu derivatives, a flavor is built from packages in the archive. So there's no PPAs involved, no strange additional packages installed. It all comes from the archive, and it's built using the infrastructure, the same infrastructure that the Ubuntu main ISO is built from.
Oh, wow. That's very quick, because Mate's not been around that long, has it?
Well, Mate started, the desktop started itself when GNOME 2 went away and GNOME 3 started. We interviewed Martin Wimpress from the Ubuntu Mate project last year, and we talked to him about Mate and the Ubuntu Mate project, and yeah, it's taken him a little while. We were hoping to make it an official flavour 6 months ago when 14.10 was out, but we didn't have all our ducks in a row, and so we had another go for this release. And Martin's worked really hard with people in the release team and people in the Ubuntu developer community in order to make sure all his packages were right and in the archive. Because the main part, like I said, is that the packages have to be in the main archive and not in a random PPA. And so there are certain rules about the packages, and they have to meet a certain quality before they can go in the archive. And so he's had a lot of help from people. But also things like the installer, the Ubiquity installer that you use when you install Ubuntu. That has hooks in it for each of the different flavors, And obviously there's no hooks in there for Ubuntu Mate, because Mate wasn't an official flavour, so he had to modify some of the packages that ship on all of the CDs in order to cope with someone installing Mate.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it, other than having all the packages which you want to use already in the archive, what is it about what Ubuntu Mate has done that means it can now become an official flavour? Why what would say Ubuntu Enlightenment need to do? Should it exist for that to become an official flavour?
Well, the same thing really. They have to have all the packages in the archive and have the necessary seeds which the ISOs are built from, and meta
when you say
packages.
The necessary seeds, what kind of seeds are you talking about?
There is a seed file which is used as part of there's a process called Germinate, which is part of the whole set of scripts that runs on a server somewhere in Canonical that builds the ISO images. And the seed... Is
this all just a bunch of really old bash scripts which someone wrote several years ago? And
Colin Watson. I think Colin Watson wrote them about 10 years ago, and they've mostly stayed the same since. But it's the same script that's used for all of the flavours.
Right.
So Ubuntu, Kubuntu, Lubuntu, Xubuntu, all of them. And they all have a separate seed file that determines what are the default set of packages that happen to be on that ISO image. And so every day when an ISO image is built, it's built on that box using those seed files. So if there was another group that wanted to have their desktop as a flavour, they could go through the same process and set up the seeds and all that. Unfortunately, it's not particularly well documented, this process. So Martin had to go through a bit of a trial of fire in order to do all of this, because it's just not written down anywhere. It's not something we do very often, like adopt new flavours. The last flavour, I think, was Ubuntu.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen a new one.
Right.
And in fact, it's a new one, but it's also kind of an old one.
Because it's based on what GNOME 2 used to look like. So, what Ubuntu looked like back in 2010, I guess.
Yeah, which is still very popular, apparently.
Yeah. Well, the other nice thing is it's quite lightweight. And one of the other benefits of being built on the Canonical infrastructure is we have not only x86, 32-bit and 64-bit Intel architecture builders, we also have ARM builders, so he can build an ARM version of Ubuntu Mate, and someone in the community has actually built an image for the Raspberry Pi 2. Now that the Raspberry Pi 2 supports Ubuntu, we now have an image that works on the Raspberry Pi, but also, more weirdly and more retro, there's an ISO image that works on PowerPC architectures.
Wow.
So
I discovered the Wii U is a PowerPC machine.
Is it?
Yeah. According to Wikipedia, anyway.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, I think I think a few of those consoles were around about that generation. The Wii and the...
No, the original Wii is ARM. No, I think the GameCube is ARM. But the PS3 was PowerPC and the Wii U is PowerPC. So the current Wii.
No, I think they're all PowerPC because they're backwardly compatible, I think. But I'm not going to argue with you about that. But if you've got an old PowerMac G5 that's like gathering dust somewhere from the past, you can chuck Ubuntu Mate on there. How cool is that? Bringing life to loads of old computers that, there's no OS X modern version that will run on them because Apple moved on from PowerPC to Intel. So
is that
that's cool? Is that
the real benefit, that it's for old machines, or is it if you prefer a different experience on the desktop?
I think it's a bit of both, really. I've got an old ThinkPad X61, which isn't super beefy, and Unity doesn't run particularly well on it. But Ubuntu Mate runs perfectly fine, and it ran. I think GNOME 2 ran fine on that era of machine, however many years ago. Ubuntu 10.10. Gosh, that's a long time ago, or 10.04 or whatever the last release that had GNOME 2 in it, which seems like quite a long time ago. So it's really good. It's really nice to see it become a proper flavour, because it's got a lot of support in the community. There are a lot of people who like it. A lot of people like Mint because it has Mate. A lot of people like Mint because it doesn't have Unity, but does have Mate. And so it's nice that we can, service that need directly in Ubuntu.
You're right, by the way, the original Wii was PowerPC as well.
You're welcome.
Anyway, we do have another community news story to squeeze into this jam-packed segment, and that is the release of an Ubuntu Convergence demo video.
Tell me more, Mark.
Ubuntu Desktop Manager Will Cook posted a video a couple of weeks ago demonstrating the fabled convergence on several devices.
Fabled.
Well, it's been talked about a lot as the thing that Ubuntu Touch is going to do, and we've not actually seen it doing it or really known what that means until now. So there's a video where it shows Ubuntu Touch running on, there's an x86 tablet, a Nexus 7 and a Nexus 4 all running Ubuntu Touch, and basically they have several apps open and you can flick through them as you can in the touch interface, which Laura will tell you more about next episode. And in fact, one of the things he's got running is LibreOffice, which not terribly easy to use on a touch screen.
No, so because you can,
but because you can,
yeah.
So then what he does is he connects a Bluetooth mouse, and then suddenly it goes from being the touch interface to being a desktop interface, and you've got it kind of seamlessly transforms because the tablet does still have, or the touch interface does still have the dock down the side and the indicators across the top. So then instead of being essentially like a set of full screen windows which you page through, they just turn into normal windows on a desktop, and you can move them around with the mouse and interact with them normally. With the phone, the Nexus 4 even shows, because you can't really appreciate it on a small screen, so he then plugs it into an external monitor, and then that's the big thing which we've all been sort of, it's always been, it'll just be your PC in your pocket and you plug it in and it becomes a full desktop thing. This is actually it doing it, which is really cool.
Yeah, it looks really good on the video, and this is actual code in the video. It's not fileware.
It's not a mock-up like some of the other things that we've shown off in the past. I think the thing that's funny for those of us in Canonical is we've known, not as a secret, but we've known that this was the vision, that you could convert, and it was really hard to articulate that to people and say, look, you plug it into a display or you plug a mouse in and that's convergence. And I think that video has cleared it up for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like you can see what it would feel like to do it, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not finished, obviously. It's a demo and it's early code, and I think Will wanted to get that video out to show people what it could look like, and you can see the display goes a bit wonky in places because it's but it's not finished.
But it's a bit like when the Android Ubuntu desktop thing, that video came out, and people sort of got that. As soon as there's some kind of demo and it's not people just trying to explain it, it seems to really click into what people are expecting.
Yeah, and people have their own.
So even now, so even now you get people saying, "Well, is that Android Ubuntu thing going to happen?" And it's like, well, there's now Ubuntu.
Right. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's nice to see, actually coming to fruition, and some of the things we've talked about for a long time actually working. It's
Yeah, and I think it says that that Microsoft have demoed something recently that's similar, and that was the bit that I felt was missing from Windows 8, because my mum had a Windows 8 touchscreen laptop, and it was quite clunky because you essentially had two different desktops that you had to switch between, and your apps were either on one desktop or the other, and one desktop was the kind of touch tile, that sort of style screen, and then there was the normal screen where you might open Office, and it was just really
and it just sort
really
of,
clunky.
You're on the tiled thing and you press Office, and then all of a sudden you just get dropped to a desktop, and then it opens up and you're like, oh well. Yeah.
And it felt unfinished, and so I was sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt that this was kind of the interim stage and stuff. But if their video is anything like this one, I can see how they're kind of getting there now.
I think one of the things for me that's explained things quite well is the fact that it's not a case of phone, tablet, laptop. It's one set of code that behaves differently
Yes.
under different circumstances. So it's not three separate devices that all run the same code. It's one device that behaves differently in different modes. So you plug a screen in, it behaves differently. You plug a mouse in, it behaves differently, and so on and so on.
Yeah, and like seeing like the full screen phone apps then being shown on the desktop in a window, that really helped. Like that really clicked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having the single code base is really... I mean, I find that impressive even just in Android apps where you switch between the tablet and the phone and it's the same app that you download and it rearranges itself differently, and that makes so much more sense than having two separate apps.
Well, I'll have to keep an eye on that and see what developments come, and I think that's the end of our community news. And actually, that's the end of the episode. So,
we're not going to have a sting there. Okay, then. Yes, that's all for episode 1 of season 8 of the Ubuntu podcast. So we'll be back next week discussing Ubuntu Phone and to bring you some command line love.
And relax. Well, don't relax too much because
don't relax yet.
there's another episode to go. Oh,
yes.
I have a podcat here.
Oh, I don't have any podcasts with me.
No, I don't
I'll have to get some for next time.
I don't have any cake.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.